Breaking news, in-depth coverage, unparalleled access to professional athletes.
Edge of Sports on the PPI Network.
With your host, Dave Zirin.
Dave Zirin returns on Edge of Sports Radio, where sports and politics collide.
Boom, we're back here on Edge of Sports Radio on the PPI Network. I'm Dave Zirin. Our next guest is responsible for everything I know about hockey, and that's actually a great insult to our next guest. He edits the epic blog Puck Daddy at Yahoo Sports. His name is Greg Wyshynski. Greg, how you doing, sir?
That is scary. That's like somebody from the E! Network teaching your child.
How do you know that's what we did in my house? That's how we homeschool. Everything my daughter learned, she learned from Steve Kometko. Question, and he's in here right now in studio, and he's not wearing clothes. Let me ask you a question, Greg, right off the bat. You know, this is a DC-based show, so the first and foremost question, this is on everybody's mind here. Bruce Boudreau to Dale Hunter, why make this change now and not in the offseason? Was that an error on George McPhee's part?
In hindsight, it was. Even though they came out of the gate 7-0 to start the season, after a lot of people thought that maybe Boudreau should get fired after getting swept by the Lightning last playoffs, they came out of the gate strong, but there were still kind of these systemic problems that you saw with this team. I mean, they were blowing leads, they were taking bad penalties, you weren't getting the same kind of offensive performances out of guys like Ovechkin. There were lingering problems, and then the winning stopped, those problems increased, and by the end of his tenure in D.C., the Washington Capitals had simply stopped playing for Bruce Boudreau. You heard that from George McPhee, the general manager. You heard that from Bruce himself. He had exhausted his bag of tricks. The tank was empty, I think is how McPhee put it. And he really did try everything. I mean, he went from being an offensive coach to try to instill a defensive system so they can win in the playoffs. By the end of his tenure, he had gone from being the jovial, foul-mouthed teddy bear that he'd been to trying to be a disciplinarian, which kind of rang hollow. So it was a move made out of necessity, I think, at this point.
Do you think Bruce Boudreau resembles like a baby that had been hit with gamma rays? He looks like this giant baby. I mean, and I don't mean baby like he's immature. I mean just like an actual baby.
Yeah, he does. I mean, or
like cuddly,
or like a Mr. Potato Head, that kind of thing. It's you're absolutely right, and honestly, it's kind of one of the reasons why this whole firing was so shocking, yet apparent, yet remorseful, is that if you think back for the last 20 years in DC sports, you'd be hard-pressed to find another coach that was this beloved.
Yeah.
And granted, at the end, there was a lot of criticism about his inability to get them to win in the playoffs and about, the alleged rifts between him and players. But at the end of the day, I mean, this guy was a revelation. No one thought a hockey coach could be this personable and this memorable.
Yeah, and I've got some, I don't know, if, I'm just like in fantasy land here, we just entered fantasy land, if Bruce Boudreau's contract was equal to Alexander Ovechkin's contract, and you're George McPhee, do you get rid of Boudreau or Ovechkin?
You get rid of Boudreau. I mean, you're always going to wind up cutting the coach's cord than the meal tickets cord. People weren't coming to the game to see Bruce Boudreau. Bruce Boudreau was not the leader of a Rock the Red fan movement that has made that a hot ticket for even a Tuesday night game against Edmonton. And to kind of square it up as an Ovechkin versus Boudreau thing might not even be fair. I mean, there are other players during his tenure and during the season who didn't necessarily perform as they should.
Yeah, number one on that list is Alexander Semin.
Yep.
And that leads to another question, because I don't know if you heard about Barry Melrose's interview on the Mike Wise show here in the D.C. area, but Melrose said that the team does not exist in the NHL that would trade for Alexander Semin. Are you with that? Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I think there are always going to be general managers out there who, if they're presented with the right deal, are going to make a trade for a guy that can pot 40 goals. The issue with Alex Semin is how many places would he actually go? Because his options are go play someplace else in the National Hockey League or go make a gajillion dollars in Russia and go back home. And I've always been told by various people that there are very few places in the National Hockey League where Semin would play. It's not Washington or bust, as has been portrayed by some people, but I think that there are very few places that he will wind up going and playing versus being able to just kind of take his puck and go home.
Okay, so there does seem to be agreement throughout the D.C. sports community that it was probably time for Bruce Boudreau to be shown the door, if not past time. Dale Hunter, the only man in NHL history with 1,000 career points and 3,000 career penalty minutes, has never coached a game in the NHL. Do you like the move?
I find it interesting that they went with, as you're kind of inferring here, that they went with somebody without any NHL experience. This team has been lambasted for not performing in the playoffs, and they've hired a coach that not only hasn't coached in the playoffs but hasn't coached in the regular season. I'll say this about him: he has long been considered one of the stars in the coaching community, and there have been many, many teams that have tried to get him out of London to come coach their NHL team. The reason he hasn't left is that he was making money hand over fist in junior hockey, and because he could wait to pick his spot. And if you listen to Hunter when he got hired, he's kind of been waiting for this opportunity with Washington. It's come around a couple times. The timing wasn't right. He didn't feel like he had the experience. I guess the time is right now. And the thing I'll say about this hiring as far as a PR standpoint, you get rid of Bruce Boudreau, who is pretty much one of the winningest coaches of the last several years in the National Hockey League, fastest 200 wins in league history. You have to bring in someone that is going to soothe the masses that are upset about this coaching change. If you had brought in Michel Therrien, the former Penguins coach, he might be more qualified to get this team playoff ready. But by no means is he going to have the leeway and the honeymoon time that Dale Hunter is going to have. Can you imagine if a guy not named Dale Hunter came out and lost the first game he coached with this team after Boudreau got fired?
Yeah.
The reaction would be quite different than what it is today.
Well, how patient do you think Caps fans are? I mean, you're from the community. You got your finger on the pulse. Well, how much time do you think they're going to give Dale Hunter to show that he can turn this around? And is it about wins and losses, or is it about style of play that people are going to be looking for?
It's going to be about style of play. It's going to be about trying to play with more fire, with more passion, to do the things that this team has shown it can do. But I think with the firing of Boudreau and the hiring of Hunter, if the team doesn't perform, then without question it's on the players. There's no more excuses. You brought in another guy. If you don't play for two coaches, then clearly it's a cancer within this roster, and the core of the team needs to be broken up. And again, like we talk about the firing of Boudreau maybe being past time. How long can you go with the same group of players that underperform and don't come and get past the second round of the playoffs? Yeah,
well, that's a good question. I mean, do we have an answer for that? I mean, how long do you go?
Probably this season.
And then you talk about a serious restructuring job, or maybe even George McPhee losing his job.
Well, yeah, and I think in the case of McPhee, he went out and acquired Roman Hamrlik, Thomas Vokoun. He's made some other veteran additions within the last calendar year. He's kind of made the changes you'd make to kickstart a losing team,
right?
And nothing's really taken so far.
Okay, let me ask you the Mike Singletary question. Tons of people said when the San Francisco 49ers went from Mike Nolan to Mike Singletary that it would turn the team around because the 49ers needed a tough guy who could kick them into shape and say, "You better get your butts out there and do your thing." Now, they left out the small problem, which is that Mike Singletary didn't actually know how to coach. But as good a speech maker as he was and as tough as he was, is there a chance that we could be looking at that with Dale Hunter, that they just got the toughest guy with the best pedigree, but, coaching the NHL is not coaching the juniors? Do we know he knows what to do at this level?
No. There's a guy that would have fit the Mike Singletary bill in this situation, and his name was Rod Langway. If they had hired Rod Langway, that would have been the Mike Singletary move. The guy who would have been a tough as nails, play without the helmet type, who isn't really the strongest coach. Dale Hunter can coach. Dale Hunter is one of the winningest coaches in recent junior hockey history. He's good with X's and O's, and he's good managing a roster and trying to get the most out of his players. And, he's had a number of guys leave that team to go and play really well in the National Hockey League. So I feel like the notion of him being a Singletary type is sort of misguided, but I could see where it comes in. I mean, let's face it, Dale Hunter is the dream candidate. When your team is struggling and playing weak hockey and not playing tough, he's the guy that you wish they'd hire to walk into the locker room and crack someone over the head with his stick to get them to start playing. Every team's got one of these guys. As a Devils fan, it's Scott Stevens for me. As a Capitals fan, I'm sure it's been Dale Hunter. Now he's there, and this is sort of like a surreal fan fantasy come true, that the guy you've always wished could come in and kick butt and take names has the opportunity to actually do that.
Would it be badass or borderline criminal if before Thursday night's game against the Penguins, they bring out Pierre Turgeon to stand at center ice and have Hunter come out and just smash him to psych up the crowd? What do you think?
Well, someone actually tracked down Turgeon yesterday. I think the Washington Times tracked down Turgeon to make sure that he had given Dale Hunter his blessing in his NHL coach. I think there's probably a statute of limitations on this kind of thing. But
what if he said no? That would have been badass.
No, that would
have been like a Joe Frazier Ali thing. I wish he was dead.
No, but as far as the fantasy scenarios for getting up for the Penguins game goes, the one that was in the back of my mind this morning is off the face-off. All five guys just drop the gloves and jump the Penguins.
Nice.
Jump the Penguins off the opening face-off and say there's a new sheriff in town.
Dale Hunter would be the stuff of legend if he did that.
The whole thing, everybody would get fined and suspended because, that's the way the NHL is these days. But for that one brief moment of time, it would be bedlam.
Oh, Greg Wyshynski, you're amazing. Puck Daddy blog is amazing. Last question for you. Where do you stand? And this is me, trying to be a hockey fan, trying to love the sport, hating the penalty shot after the after the overtime, hating that. Where do you stand on the penalty shot?
It's the worst thing in sports.
Thank you. Much worse than soccer, right? Much worse than soccer.
Much worse than soccer. Dude, listen, I hold hockey to a high standard. I think it's the ultimate team game. To end the game without a pass being attempted, without a defenseman playing his position on the ice, to artificially cap a 65 minutes of team hockey because you're worried about these guys getting tired or because you want to make sure the nightly news isn't bumped. Come on. The shootout is the single worst thing about hockey these days. If you like it, you probably enjoyed the Transformers sequels. You're probably someone who's easily amused by shiny objects. It's got nothing to do with team hockey, and I will fight this fight as the vocal minority against the shootout until my last breath, sir. It must go. We must not have playoff seedings determined by a skills competition.
Well, I enlist in the Puck Daddy jihadist army to end the penalty shot and its scourge on what is otherwise a fantastic sport. And anybody out there who's a Shia LaBeouf fan, you stay away from the arena. We don't want you there, LaBeoufs. Stay away. You ruined the Wall Street sequel. All right. Greg, thank you so much for joining us on Edge of Sports Radio. We so appreciate it.
Anytime, Dave. Thanks for having me.
That was Greg Wyshynski, ladies and gents, and he edits the Puck Daddy blog on Yahoo Sports. That is required reading for everybody out there in Edge of Sports Nation. Not just so you're conversant on hockey, but so you're conversant on actually how hockey is played. We got to go right now, but we're going to be back right after this with, oh my goodness, I'm so happy to have this guy. Will Strickland, former San Antonio Spur, will be in the house. We'll be back right after this.
Edge of Sports Radio. Dave Zirin will return after this.
Edge of Sports on the PPI Network.
With your host, Dave Zirin.